Birthdays. Why does the Jehovah's Witness religion prohibit birthday celebrations? And is their stance on this matter likely to change? That's what I'll be speaking about today on the Jexit podcast. Hello and welcome to the Jexit podcast. I'm your host Riley, a former Jehovah's Witness who left the religion in 2019. Okay, today we are going to be speaking about birthdays. Now it is currently Sunday morning on the 7th of April and I am feeling absolutely terrible, but there is a very good reason why. So last night, a really good friend of mine who is also an ex-JW celebrated his birthday. Now, his birthday party was held at a bar that specializes in rum. And me being of Caribbean origin could not pass up the chance to go and celebrate my friend's birthday and drink as much rum as I possibly could, which I did. And which explains why I'm feeling so rough right now. But I have to say that despite how much the room is spinning at this current moment, and despite how heavy my head feels, it was totally worth it. We all had an amazing time. It was so great to see my friend happy, enjoying his birthday with his friends. And to be part of that celebration was absolutely fantastic. And the whole experience has inspired the topic of today's episode. So most people know that Jehovah's Witnesses do not celebrate birthdays. In fact, I think it's fair to say that Jehovah's Witnesses are more well known for the things that they don't do, for the things that they don't believe in, as opposed to the things that they do believe in. Because the things they don't do and don't believe in is just so much. There are so many things that you cannot do as a Jehovah's Witness, birthdays being just one of them. So let's talk about it. So whenever I'm speaking about this subject to people who have never been Jehovah's Witnesses, I always break it down like this. Firstly, I tell them all the reasons that the organization puts forward for prohibiting birthday celebrations. Secondly, I tell them about my personal opinion as to why the organization prohibits birthday celebrations. And lastly, I speak about the impact that celebrating my birthday has had on my life since I left the religion. So that is how I'd like to discuss this subject in today's episode. Okay, so what reasons does the leadership of the Jehovah's Witness religion put forward for prohibiting birthday celebrations? Now, there are 4 reasons in total. Reason number 1. There are only 2 occasions where birthday celebrations are explicitly and unambiguously mentioned in the Bible. And on both of those occasions, very bad things happened. Namely, people were executed in celebration of the birthday. These 2 events are addressed in the July 15th, 1980 edition of the Watchtower. And on page 30, it has this to say. The Bible reports only 2 birthday celebrations, both of persons who were not servants of the true God. The first was that of Pharaoh of Egypt. It was marked by the hanging of Pharaoh's baker, who had been in prison with Joseph. The second, some 1,800 years later, was the birthday of Herod Antipas, during which the daughter of Herodias asked for the head of John the Baptizer. Is it just coincidental that they are mentioned and that both were for persons not having God's approval? Or could it be that Jehovah deliberately had these details recorded in his word, which says is beneficial for teaching, for reproving, for setting things straight? So this article is reasoning that The two people celebrating their birthdays in these events were not worshippers of Jehovah. People were killed to celebrate these birthdays. And the fact that those details are recorded in the scriptures is evidence of Jehovah's disapproval. Therefore, true worshippers of Jehovah should not celebrate birthdays. Now, it doesn't take a great deal of thought to pick holes in this line of reasoning. Firstly, the two people who were celebrating their birthdays in these events were kings. They were autocratic rulers whose word was law. And throughout human history, royalty and nobility have always had extravagant lifestyles. That is true right up until the present day. We have absolutely no idea how people in Bible times, the common people, would have celebrated their birthdays, if at all. So recording the birthday celebrations of kings and using that as a benchmark is really extreme. Also, if the fact that the Bible portrays these two events in a negative light is a good reason for not celebrating birthdays, then wouldn't that line of reasoning also apply to other things that the Bible portrays in a negative light? For example, dogs. Dogs are mentioned in the Bible 40 times, and in every single one of those mentions, they are described in a negative way. They are portrayed as being unclean, and even compared to groups of people that Jehovah disapproved of, for example, the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. But are Jehovah's Witnesses prohibited from having dogs as pets? Another example of a practice that is always spoken of negatively in the Bible is that of painting one's eyes for decorative purposes. There are two mentions in the Bible of wearing eye paint. One in reference to Queen Jezebel at 2 Kings chapter 9 and verse 30, and the other in reference to the apostate nation of Israel at Jeremiah chapter 4 and verse 30. And yet, the organization does not forbid the wearing of eye makeup. So this line of reasoning is inconsistent to say the least. Now, inconsistent reasoning is nothing new to the Jehovah's Witness religion. But in this case, and this is just my personal feeling, it makes me feel like that isn't the real reason, that this is just an excuse and there's another more sinister reason behind it. And I'll get to that later. Okay, let's move on to reason number 2. It gives undue honor to an imperfect human being. This practice of giving undue honor to a person is sometimes in Watchtower literature referred to as creature worship, which can also be understood as a form of idolatry. So what is the rationale behind this reason? The December 22nd, 1981 issue of the Awake magazine has this to say on page 14. Although childbirth is a joyful occasion, the Bible puts it in perspective with the interesting comment, "A name is better than good oil, and the day of death than the day of one's being born." Ecclesiastes 7:1. So the imperfect life we have at birth is not really life at all from God's point of view. That is why a good name with God is so important. Would it not be better to seek and rejoice in a good relationship with God than to celebrate a birth date? Now, I'm going to be very honest with you. I am struggling to explain the reasoning of this point. To me, it just sounds like a completely irrelevant non sequitur argument. But I'm going to try my best. What this article seems to be saying is that it is better to celebrate the legacy that a person leaves behind upon their death of faithful service to Jehovah God than it is to celebrate their birth when they haven't yet lived a life to build up that legacy. What? What even is that? I really hope that whoever wrote this article done their stretches before attempting such a reach. Talk about twisting scriptures. This makes no sense. But they seriously put this forward as a reason not to celebrate birthdays. Have you ever been speaking to someone? You're asking them a question, maybe making a request of them, and they say no. And then they give you their reasons, and their reasons are so weak and flimsy. You just have no choice but to conclude that there's another reason they're not telling you. Those are the kind of vibes I'm getting when I read this paragraph. It just sounds completely ridiculous. Okay, let's move on to reason number 3. Birthdays were not celebrated by Jews in Bible times, nor by Christians. Now, while it may be the case that Jews and early Christians didn't celebrate birthdays, does that mean that celebrating a birthday is wrong? The Bible does not command Christians explicitly to refrain from celebrating birthdays. And neither does it command Christians to celebrate their birthdays. So if there's no explicit command or no explicit prohibition, shouldn't it then be up to the conscience of the individual? Isn't that how Watchtower decides that other things should be a conscience matter? Why should there be a different rule when it comes to birthdays? The JW publication Knowledge That Leads to Eternal Life has this to say on page 126. Since the scriptures do not reveal the birthday of the perfect man Jesus Christ, why should we give special attention to the birthdays of imperfect humans? So because we don't know Jesus' birthday, and because we're not commanded to celebrate Jesus' birthday, and since he is so much better than you, if we don't celebrate his birthday, why should you celebrate yours? Another example of reaching for the most ridiculous, flimsy excuse possible. Okay, and finally, reason number 4, which is a JW favorite. We do not celebrate birthdays because it's pagan. The number one excuse that JWs have for not celebrating anything. If there's any chance that a Jehovah's Witness could celebrate or engage in anything that's even slightly fun or pleasurable, the organization just whips out the old pagan card and puts a stop to it immediately. Page 157 of the Bible Teach book says, even if Jesus' disciples had known the exact date of his birth, they would not have celebrated it. Why? Because as the World Book Encyclopedia says, the early Christians considered the celebration of anyone's birth to be a pagan custom. The reasoning from the Scriptures book, page 69, says, down to the 4th century, Christianity rejected the birthday celebration as a pagan custom. Those are just 2 references from JW publications citing paganism as a reason for prohibiting birthday celebrations. And there are many, many more. Feel free to look them up on the Watchtower online library if you're so inclined. But why is this a bad reason for refraining from celebrating one's birthday? The answer is quite simple. Almost everything we do, almost every custom, almost every tradition, particularly in the Western world, has pagan roots. And I'm just going to run through a brief list of things that we do on a daily basis that have pagan origins. 1. The days of the week, named after pagan gods. 2. The months of the year, named after pagan, specifically Roman gods. 3. The wearing of neckties have pagan origin. 4. The wearing of perfume has pagan origin. 5. Flying kites has pagan origins. 6. Weddings. Traditional wedding celebrations are filled with pagan customs. The ceremony, the cake, the dress, candles, wedding rings, all of these things have pagan origins. For Jehovah's Witnesses to have a truly pagan-free lifestyle, they would have to move to their own country. Of all the reasons they give for not celebrating birthdays, this is the one that makes the least amount of sense. Inconsistency is staggering. Okay, so now that we've looked into the reasons why they say they don't celebrate birthdays, I'm going to share with you my opinion of why I think they don't celebrate birthdays. Please feel free to disagree with the next statement that I'm going to make, and that is that the Jehovah's Witness religion is a cult. And if there is one thing that all cults need, is for their members not to think of themselves as individuals. Individuality is the antithesis of the cult mindset. The perfect cult member thinks of themselves as a mindless drone whose life has no value outside of service to the cult as a whole. The phrase good for nothing slave springs immediately to mind when speaking about this. And if you are or have ever been a Jehovah's Witness, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So if you're a cult leader, how do you undermine a person's individuality? Many different cults have many different tactics for accomplishing this. Some cults have shame rituals where they will physically single out a member, encircle them, and then proceed to insult and shame them for perceived past sins. This is designed to make the person in the middle of the circle feel absolutely worthless. Some cults will change their members' names to detach them from their pre-cult identity. Some cults will inform a strict dress code so that everyone looks the same. But in my opinion, how the Jehovah's Witness cult accomplishes this is by stripping their members of any and all reason to feel good about themselves. Let me ask you a question. Are you a Jehovah's Witness or a former Jehovah's Witness? Do you struggle to accept compliments from people? If your answer to that question is yes, this is the reason why. If your JW upbringing was anything like mine, you were told over and over again that it was proud or haughty to think good things about yourself. You were told that if someone complimented you on an assignment you had in the theocratic ministry school, you were supposed to redirect that praise to Jehovah instead of accepting it for yourself. This is all part of a strategy to make you feel like you are not valued and thereby undermine your individuality. Cult members need to be docile so that they can be controlled. And a person who is confident, a person who has self-esteem, a person who values themselves will not be easy to control. That is the whole point of this. Let me tell you about the first time I celebrated my birthday. My first birthday was in April 2020, and I was 43 years old. The UK was going through a lockdown at the time due to the global COVID pandemic. So my birthday celebration consisted of me, my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, in one room, because we were renting a one-room apartment, music which we played through the TV, and a birthday cake. It was an extremely simple, extremely modest occasion, not like the birthday party I went to last night. But let me tell you, I promise I'm speaking no lies when I say this. I do take the heavens and the earth as witnesses against me. I'm getting biblical with this one. That day was the most loved, the most valued, the most recognized, the most appreciated, the most celebrated that I have ever felt in my entire life up until that point. And at a conservative estimate, I spent approximately 2/3 of that entire day in tears. Why? Because I didn't feel worthy. I felt like I had been given something that I didn't deserve. And that feeling alone proves to me, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the Watchtower strategy on prohibiting birthday celebration absolutely works. It would take another 3 years and another 3 birthday celebrations for me to actually feel comfortable celebrating my birthday guilt-free. Incidentally, it's my birthday in exactly 7 days from now. And this time last year, my wife and I were in Paris. We celebrated my birthday in a park. We were lying on the grass just underneath the Sacré-Cœur church, which is a famous landmark in Paris. And it was my first birthday where I didn't cry out of feelings of guilt and unworthiness. I actually made a special birthday TikTok on that day to mark the occasion and what a milestone it was for me in my post-cult journey. And I'll leave a link to it in the description below. Now, before I wrap up, I want to speak about one last thing. As I'm sure you're aware, the JW religion is going through a huge rebrand project at the moment. They are making significant changes to policies and doctrines. And many of these changes are actually perks designed to placate the members in a similar way that an employer would do with their disgruntled employees. So far, we've seen men being given permission to grow beards, women being given permission to wear trousers, cancelling the requirement to submit how much ministry you've done each month. So the JW leadership is going out of its way to keep the members happy, to prevent them from leaving. Because believe me, many people are leaving. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because it's my opinion, an opinion that is shared by many former Jehovah's Witnesses who watch the organization with keen interest. It is our shared opinion that the prohibition on celebrating birthdays will soon come to an end. I don't want to put too fine a point on it, but I would be extremely surprised if by the end of this calendar year, Jehovah's Witnesses were still not allowed to celebrate their birthdays. As I said, the organization is rebranding in order to keep its members happy. And since the reasons for this prohibition are so flimsy and weak, this would be a really easy concession to make. I want to stress, I'm not saying that this is definitely going to happen. I'm saying that given the current trend of the relaxing of policies, I would be very surprised if it didn't. To put it another way, if I was the head of a PR firm and the governing body hired me to turn their fortunes around, and my brief was to implement changes to make members more likely to stay and less likely to leave, this is the thing that would be at the top of my list, or one of the things at least. So now over to you. What are your thoughts on this subject? Why do you think the organization prohibits birthdays? If you're an ex-JW, do you celebrate your birthday now? Please let me know in the comments. And that is it for this week's episode of the Jexit podcast. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like, share, comment, and also subscribe so that you're alerted each time a new episode is posted. Thanks again for tuning in and have a great week.